What are you looking at? Strike a pose, Vogue. Let your body move to the groove. Hello and welcome to the next episode of Matt and Todd Go to the Movies, the podcast where Matt and Todd watch a movie, this time on Netflix in their top 10 list, and then we review it, still in person, still in Matt's Xterra, and we let you know how we feel about this movie and our rating, and whether or not maybe you should take the chance on it. I am Todd Domer.
And I'm Matt Malloy, and yes, welcome to another Netflix review. Today we're going to be reviewing a movie called The Woman in the Window.
The Woman in the Window.
Yes, and interesting little film with a few different twists and turns.
One of those twisty turns.
Twisty turns.
I think this was also a film that was supposed to come out in theaters, and I think Netflix bought the rights to it.
Okay.
To distribute it.
That could be possible for sure.
Because we definitely, before COVID, we definitely saw trailers for this movie.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Netflix picked it up. They were like, we're going to have this on our network instead of in theaters, and you guys will deal with it. And we did. We watched it. So you got a few people in the cast here. The main star,
the woman that's in the window, if you will.
Yes. Well, is she the woman that's in the window?
I guess that's fair. It could be two people.
It could be.
I took it to be her, but it's open to interpretation.
Well, Amy Adams is the lead in this. She plays a child psychologist who is separated from her family. Well, I won't get into the plot yet, but you've also got Gary Oldman in this movie, Julianne Moore, and Jennifer Jason Leigh. And that was it for me, for people that I recognized and thought about. Oh, no, Mackie's in it. Anthony Mackie's in it. And I don't know that person. Who's that?
Wyatt Russell.
Son
of Kurt Russell.
Oh, okay.
And he was the new Captain America in the Falcon and Winter Soldier show.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And there's one other person I recognize that I'm searching through. The psychiatrist that Amy Adams had looked familiar to me, but I don't actually see his credit anywhere through here. So we'll just skip that.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. He did look familiar, but I
don't think he's like super famous, but I definitely recognized him from something.
Right. So, okay. So there's your cast. There's your stars.
Your key players.
What is this movie about? Well, Amy Adams' character, Anna Fox, is kind of housebound. She's agoraphobic. She can't go outside. She is separated from her family, but she talks to them a lot, and on the phone. And she lives in an apartment, and she watches her neighborhood a lot. So she watches things she's got like another building across the way, and she can kind of see into windows, and she spends some time doing that and like learning what goes on in the neighborhood and stuff like that. And then a family moves in. Oh, excuse me.
Man.
A little yawny.
This movie must not have impressed you. You're yawning through it.
A family moves in across the street, which that's where you run into it's the Russell family, and you run into Gary Oldman and Julianne Moore. And they've got a kid too, named Ethan. So you've got Alistar Jane and Ethan Russell. And so Anna Fox is kind of watching this crew, and she has some kind of strange interactions with them. Like the son comes over and talks to her and brings her like a gift from his mother and stuff like that. And there's kind of some you don't quite know what's going on, and then she starts to believe that there's some kind of abuse happening, like the son is being abused, and so she's kind of nervously watching this crew across the street. And then she ends up having like this night of talking and drinking with the mother, and what happens after that is kind of like she thinks she sees that woman get killed across the street. So it's kind of like a Rear Window type of situation, very much callback to the Alfred Hitchcock movie.
Yeah, and whatever the Shia LaBeouf remake of that was, it definitely wasn't called Rear Window, but
Rear Window 2.
yeah,
Maybe.
Electric Boogaloo.
Well,
or really any other movie about the same premise. We
Right.
don't have to isolate those two.
right. But I think the original
Yes.
original movie was
Yes.
Rear Window. So Amy Adams or Anna Fox, Amy Adams' character, is calling the police, and she's like, "What's going on?" And the police come, and they're talking to her, and then, then strangely the Russell family is over in her apartment, and they're like, "You didn't see my wife get killed. Here's my wife. She's right here." And it's not the person that she saw get killed and believed was the wife of Alistair Russell. So the woman that she saw get killed was played by Jennifer Jason Leigh. Julianne Moore comes over with, a different face, obviously, and Amy Adams is doubting her sanity, and everyone's doubting her sanity because she's agoraphobic and she's on some meds that make her potentially hallucinate. So that all goes down, and she's doubting herself and wondering what's going on. And then, some more stuff happens, some weird stuff. She gets an email of like her sleeping in her own bed. She gets a picture of her email. She gets an email that is a picture of her sleeping in her own bed at like 2 a.m. So like someone's been in her house, and so these type of things keep happening. There's something clearly wrong, but you don't know whether or not it's really happening or it's something about medication or disability or something like that. And by the end of the movie, you finally understand what's happened. But I won't reveal what happens.
Yeah.
So there you have it.
It's a twisty-turny one.
It's a twisty-turny. There's the setup, there's the plot, there's the players. Todd, what do you think? Go.
So this movie, my biggest problem with this movie, and it's honestly any movie that has to do about, I don't know how to toe the line here. Any movie, I compare this movie to Silver Linings Playbook, like how everyone loved that movie, stuff like that, when it's just these people who have mental illnesses, and not that this movie is supposed to be like actually like played out in real life or anything like that, but I have a hard time with movies where the white people have a severe mental illness but also can get by super easily because some reason in these movies money's not a factor, like, which is so apparent in this one. Like, she's got this really debilitating thing where she cannot leave the house. She's not working. She's got a renter who rents the basement, but then that's it. And she's somehow a rich white lady who it's never an issue. Like, she buys whatever she wants. She drinks all the time, like goes through wine bottles every day, and like nothing is an issue about finances and stuff like that. And to me, that's such a big thing that takes me out of movies like this. Like, I know it's not the point of the movie, but it's like when you're supposed to like be invited into someone's life and like you're kind of learning all the deep dark secrets and stuff like that, how they function on a daily basis is somewhat important to me. Like, maybe a lot of people can overlook it, but that stuff's like, I'm like, it really takes me out of the movie. That was like the biggest thing. I was like, oh, like, here's another movie about white people who have severe mental illnesses, but somehow they can just skirt by, like, and it's not an issue that, funds are unlimited or whatever. So that's the biggest problem I have with this movie. The other it's not the biggest problem, but I don't know, other thoughts that I have about this movie is that I just found myself not caring. And I don't know if it's because of my biggest issue or maybe it just wasn't hitting home with me. You're supposed to have this suspenseful movie and suspense thriller kind of thing. And like I've said before, for suspense thrillers, if it's not a tight movie, then it's hard for me to really get into. It's got to be tight. It's got to be neat. There are times where you should be questioning, but there are times where you should know what's happening. And I felt like it was a little all over the place. It also didn't know what kind of movie it wanted to be. It's a mystery. It's a thriller. At times it's a slasher. It's there's so many things happening. It just changed gears so much. And it was just not the best experience. And there's some good performances in this movie. I think Gary Oldman is a fantastic actor, and he kind of hits it out of the park with almost anything he does, even though he had a pretty small part. He doesn't have many scenes in this movie. But it's weird. It's every time he's in the movie, he dominates the scene. Amy Adams is pretty good. I'm not the biggest fan of hers, but I thought for what was being called for her to do, it's a little, she did fine. Everyone else in the movie does fine. I don't feel like anyone really brought their super A game, and I wasn't blown away. But it's I don't know. I feel like I'm being pretty unfair to this movie. I just couldn't get into it, and it wasn't super for me. But I mean, some of the twisty turns were surprising. Some of them were not. I would say the biggest twisty turn. Well, there's two super big twisty turns. One I kind of saw coming, and then one I really didn't. But, so it delivered, I think, in that area of twist of ooh, but it's without being able to talk about the ending, it's really hard for me to discuss really the other problem I have with this movie of and I'm going to say it, I don't think it's a spoiler, but mental illnesses magically going away have I have such a huge problem with that as a person who has mental illnesses. When movies portray that if something can happen or you do a certain thing and it magically goes away, I'm oh, screw you. Right. Is how I feel. So, I don't know. It just wasn't for me. If you love suspense movies and you love Amy Adams and you're a super fan of Rear Window and any other movie that kind of follows that oh, I saw something from my window, I'm trying to report it, but no one believes me, then sure, go see this movie. It's on Netflix. It's really not even it's really PG-13. I feel like a 13 kid above can probably watch this movie, and it's not the biggest issue. But it just didn't hit home with me. And I felt myself just having a hard time caring and being in the movie and all the things that I've already said. So, not the biggest hit with me. But if movies like this are up your alley, there's no big reason to me why I wouldn't say go see this movie. Personally, it just didn't hit, but maybe it, will hit with other people. So I don't really have a good reason to say don't see this movie besides a personal not liking of it or not really feeling it. So I guess that means go see this movie. Asterisk, I wasn't the biggest fan. So right. That's where I'm at. Matt? How'd you feel about this old crazy, kooky movie, Twisty Turny?
Twisty Turny. Well, something I was going to bring up, which was your number one problem, is a problem for me as well, in that we have some issues with a movie about mental illness. And, I'm fine with you having a movie about mental illness, but it needs to be somewhat realistic, and you mentioned some flaws with it. And it shouldn't be, for most movies, it shouldn't be the star of the show. The star of the show should not be, this person has mental illness, and so the plot unfolds.
Yeah.
which I felt like this movie failed at that. They did do that.
Yeah.
They said, Amy Adams, you've got mental illness in this movie, and that's going to be why the plot, that's going to be a plot device for us.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
Yeah.
I think about, there are good ways to do it. Like a movie we just saw here today
Yeah.
deals with dementia, and I felt like they handled it fine. Like
Right.
it wasn't the same. Now they didn't use it as a plot device. It was part of the story, but it wasn't like used to further the plot necessarily, like happens in this movie. But anyway, I digress. I will say that the movie, it kept me interested. I wanted to find out what happened. I was somewhat surprised by both the turns at the end. But to me, the story is somewhat muddled,
Yeah.
somewhat jumbled. Like you say, they couldn't really decide what type of movie they were making. And in the end, that I think the story suffers for that.
Yeah.
The acting was pretty good. You mentioned, I think all the kind of stars did pretty well in their roles. And I guess overall, I would say I felt like this was a very average movie of its genre.
Sure.
You know, the murder mystery, no one believes me type movie. Yeah, this is that, but it's not a great version of it.
Of that.
It's not terrible, but anyway, I would say don't watch it. Skip it.
Ooh.
But it's like right on that line. You're like, if you have nothing else to do, if you want to watch a movie, okay, you can watch this, but just know it's nothing special.
It's hard to say
average.
completely skip a Netflix movie unless you don't have Netflix. And I'm like, okay, skip that. There's no reason to go out of your way to get Netflix or borrow someone's password to get it. If you already have Netflix and you're gonna watch a movie and like this is up your alley, then it's hard for me to say don't watch this movie.
Right. But I would say if you're looking for a great movie, find something better.
Yeah. That's fair.
Listen to our podcast, and there's some good ones in there you can find on Netflix.
Absolutely, yeah. I will say, you talking, it pointed out, I can tell you one of the main points that happened in this movie where I fell out of it. Like, I'm like interested, and then this happened, and I fell out of it. And it's not at all a surprise, and it happens very early in the film, where you're following this thing, Amy Adams, child psychologist, knows the ins and outs of medication and what they do, how you should be taking them, all the side effects, all the risks and stuff like that. And she drinks all the time on medications that you shouldn't be drinking. And I think there's an underlying reason why she's doing that, but there is a point where someone points out to her, these are not, you're on meds that you shouldn't be drinking. And her response is, oh, well, they all say that. Like, that's her legit response to it. And I was like, that could have been an in-depth conversation. Or it could have been a point where she was like, I know that, and I know it's horrible, but I can't stop drinking. It could have been like something more, but it was so toss away that I was like, all right, well, you just lost me a little bit there.
Yeah.
So, anyway. Okay. What's the name of the thing that when you're gardening that has the 3 prongs on it when you're like digging through the dirt? Do you know the name
I don't
of
know,
that thing?
a claw or
Yeah.
a weed claw
A
or
weed-
something
I don't
like
know.
that. I don't. I'm
That's
not
what
a
I'm
gardener.
gonna. That's the rating system. Whatever
Okay.
that's called. We're just gonna call it a weed claw.
Okay.
How many? And it does majorly come into play at some point.
It does.
How many weed claws would you give this movie? Obviously 5 being the best,
Right.
Because you can get the most gardening done.
That's
But
right.
0 being the worst because how can you garden without a weed claw?
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a weed claw that at a certain point in this movie is used as a weapon, and does puncture flesh. So,
Yeah.
Ed, if you're listening to this, there's some head trauma involving
yes.
a weed
Yeah.
claw, in fact.
Yeah.
Um,
It really is out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Didn't even. There's no setup to it.
yeah. So I'm gonna say what I said before, which is this is a very average entry into the genre. So I'm gonna go right down the line and say 2.5 weed claws out of 5.
Yeah.
That's, if you're counting the individual prongs, that would be 8 or 7.5 prongs at 3 weed claw prongs
Nice.
per rating point.
You really took it to the next level there.
Yes. So that's where I'm at.
Oh man. Yeah, I mean, like, I think I would be right there with you if it wasn't like of just like right down the road, whatever, watch this movie, don't watch this movie, I don't really care. Like, I'd be right there with you.
Right.
Just like, but as a movie, I think it's down the road. But if I'm giving my personal reaction to it, which definitely plays in the
Which
part
you
of
are.
the rating here, then
Yes.
that's gonna sink it to about. I think I'm gonna land on a 2. Of
Okay.
just for all the reasons I've already specified that I won't go into again because I'm sure no one wants to hear it again. That I'm dropping it to a 2. It was pretty disappointing. I wasn't really looking forward to this movie anyway, even from the trailers that we watched. I was like, I hope this doesn't fall on us, but it did.
It
So,
did.
yeah, that's where I'm at.
Okay. Well, that's going to mean our average rating for The Woman at the Window.
And the woman in the window.
The Woman in the Window, excuse me.
Jeez.
Got my object participle phraseology of English grammarification wrong.
Well, I'll get it right because we're professionals here.
The Woman in the Window.
As we both sweat in your car again.
Yes. Well, we're going to come up with an average rating of 2.25, 2.25 weed claws used for gardening or facial attacks.
Yeah.
And that's not great. You can watch this movie if you want to.
Yeah. It's not in the bad area.
Yeah.
But it's a little farther than good than you would probably want it to be.
Yeah. It's below the midpoint
Yeah.
of our rating system. So that's that. And thank you all listeners for listening to our podcast. We'll continue to make these and you continue to download and listen to them. And that's how the system works. So we'll see you next time.
Da 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 da
Da da
da da da.
da da da.